Hello, Chris from Flight Tales here, and I'm just heading over to the college here this morning to go do another lesson. Today we're going to be learning about climbing and descending, so come along and I hope you enjoy.
Length remaining 6,239 feet. To inform ATC that you have information November.
Untitled Tower, call Papa Uniform X-ray, Golden Shark, runway 29 on.
Papa Uniform X-ray, tower, wind 2808, clear for takeoff, runway 29.
Clear for takeoff, runway 29, Golf Papa Uniform X-ray. And whenever you are ready. And 1, 2, 3, full power. Engines are in the green.
Look to tower, 172.
Airspeed alive.
Email information November.
And 44, rotate.
Do you want to dance?
Every time we leave and come back to an airport,
Traffic in 3 Bravo, this is November 10
we have to climb and we have to descend. Right. So learning the procedures for both of those and how they feel, how we know when they're going wrong, is important to just the concept of flight itself. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure my mixture is full rich. I'm going to do a lookout. My lookout, instead of going side to side, is now going to be angled more upwards. I'm looking for any birds, any other kind of air traffic that might get in my way as I'm climbing. To enter a climb, attitude, power, trim. First, I bring my attitude up, wait until I'm within 5 knots of my airspeed, and then add full power. After that, I start trimming for it. I'm going to go ahead, and I'm going to start with an en route climb first. An en route climb for us is between 90 and 100 knots. Right. We don't really care about how fast we get to our altitude. We just care that we get there eventually, and more that we're traveling far as we're climbing. We still see a lot of ground in front of us, not so much sky. Our climb rate isn't too high, but we're traveling further than we're going up, and that's the whole purpose of it. Next one is a normal climb. So now the ground finally disappears and I see all sky. This one is between 80 and 85 knots. It's still kind of the same idea that I don't really care how long it takes me to get up to my altitude. I care more than an en route, since my climb rate is a bit higher. It doesn't really matter when I get up there. Right. Then we go to VY. VY is definitely a higher nose-up attitude. Yep. In the diamond, 75 knots is what we're usually aiming for. We're going to need more right rudder as the nose keeps pitching up. But this is our most efficient. This is the most altitude for the least amount of time. Right. Finally, we're going to look at VX. Now it's all sky in front of us, and we can feel how pitched up we are right now. Yep. Airspeed 60 knots, even at full power, we're not climbing very fast. Once this settles, this rate of climb is going to drop to like 400 feet, 300 feet per minute. Okay. This is all about obstacle clearance. Yep. We're not worried about the distance we're traveling, because right now we're only grounding 59 knots. Right. So we're not traveling far, and we're not really climbing quickly, but it's about climbing as much as we can in the least amount of distance. Right. This is inefficient. We'll never do this unless we're practicing obstacle clearance. To level off from a climb, attitude, power, trim, just like I entered it. Yep. I'm going to take 10% of my climb rate, 50 feet. I'm going to start dropping the nose. Now we're going to talk about descents. So, we have 2 different types of descents that we focus on. Power off and power on. So we're going to start with the power off first. First thing I'm going to do is make sure my mixture is full rich and my fuel pump is on. 1, 2, 3, power idle. I'm going to pitch and trim for 73 knots. Best glide. In order to slow down, but maintain my altitude, I need to pitch back. I'm going to have to start trimming for this too, so I don't have to struggle with it. 73 knots. I'm going to let the nose drop. I'm going to trim for this new attitude which keeps me at 73 knots. This also means that power idle, my engine temperature is going to start going down.
Right.
My oil temperature is going to start going down. My oil pressure is going to start going up because the oil temperature is going down. So, I need to be sure that when I do eventually add power to level off, that the plane's going to respond to me correctly.
Right.
So, in order to make sure of that, every 500 feet, I'm going to do an engine clear, or some people call it an engine warm. When I add power, I have to remember to add right rudder, because the plane's going to want to yaw to the right. So, full power, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. As well, when we're in the power off descent, we're basically gliding at this point.
Yep.
So, I need to find out how far I can actually glide. Because 11,000 feet, for every 1,000 feet I drop, that's all fine and dandy. But what does that actually mean?
Okay.
So I'm going to find some kind of object in the distance. Let's say the very tip of the coast before it goes west.
Okay.
So finding the distance between that point and my dashboard,
Okay.
and then trying to keep that constant. If that changes, I'm going to look for another landmark
Okay.
and see about that distance. Once it's constant, I'm going to know, okay, somewhere in this range, I'm going to reach.
Okay.
And that's how I figure out my glide range. It's very rudimentary. A lot of times it's not going to be that accurate, but it gives you a rough idea of how far you can make it.
Okay.
If I want to level off at 3,500 feet, well, 50 feet before, add my power to cruise, make sure I control the attitude, finding that cruise, and trimming for it. You have control.
I have control.
So, I want you to go ahead. I want you to climb up to 4,500 feet.
Okay.
And I want you to do it at a VY.
Pitch for
Coming up to 4,000 feet and heading back towards
full
area
power.
5.
Awesome. Don't forget your right rudder. And one thing you're going to notice is the usual stuff that we saw with a pitch-up attitude. Is our airspeeds a bit slower than usual. Altimeter's climbing up, BSI is showing a positive rate. Even with full power, RPMs aren't as high as they would be if we added this much power in cruise. Heading and turn coordinator should be constant, and our attitude indicator is showing a pitch up. Prepare for a descent. I want to descend down to 3,500.
Okay. Here's full rich. Fuel pump is on. 1, 2, 3. Power idle.
And we'll pitch and trim for 73 knots.
73. 73 and bridge post and.
And then, every 500 feet, go ahead, remember the rudder, and 1, 2, 3. So now we're going to talk about power on descents. So power on gives us more control over our descent rate, at our speed, at our engine clearing, because the engine's running so we don't have to worry about it. It's the kind of descent we'll be doing most often.
Right.
So, same checks, mixture full rich, fuel pump on, might as well. Do a quick look out below me. And I'm going to bring my power back to 1,500. I can choose any power setting.
Right.
I want to, but 1,500 is usually it's the most common.
Right.
I'm going to pick a speed. I'm going to pick 80 knots.
Okay.
So, same thing. I maintain my altitude, keeping my pitch up until I get to 80. And then I let the nose drop. I can change my rate of descent doing a bunch of different things. If I pitch down, I can increase my speed. And by increasing my speed, now I have a faster rate of descent.
Right.
If I also wanted to increase my rate of descent, I can reduce power. That reduction in power means I need to pitch down to maintain the same airspeed, which means I'm going to have a higher rate of descent.
Right.
The opposite is also true. If I pitch back, so I slow down, I'm going to have a slower rate of descent. Up to a point. Once I go past my best glide, 73, then slowing down actually increases my rate of descent.
Right, right.
And adding power will also decrease my rate of descent. Go ahead and give me a power on descent down to 2,000 feet.
Okay.
So if you wanted to increase this rate of descent,
yep,
go ahead. go ahead and increase your rate of descent. However you want. Exactly, pitching down increases our airspeed, increases our rate of descent. So now we're going to talk about factors affecting climb.
Okay.
There's two factors that I need to talk about what we don't have in the diamonds. So carburetor heat.
Right.
When you activate carburetor heat, it takes away power from the engine.
Right.
So if you're trying to climb, it's recommended you take the carburetor heat off unless you're flying through icing conditions.
Okay. Yep.
Especially on takeoff. Especially on takeoff, carburetor heat should be off.
Right.
And there's retractable gear. We do not have any.
Okay.
But the Seminoles do.
Right.
And when you get into the Seminole, the moment you get two positive rates of climb, so positive VSI and the altimeter's increasing, gear comes up.
Right.
Because all they do is add drag.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So if you're climbing, you want them gone.
Yep.
But there's one thing we do have, and that's flaps. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to set up for VY climb. I'm going to go for 75 knots. I'll go for 75 knots. So at cruise, very nose up. I have a lot of sky, not so much ground. This is what we'll usually see after we bring our flaps up.
Right.
With takeoff flaps below 100, flaps to takeoff. If I'm still pitching for 75, I need to now lower my nose.
For the
Right.
straight north-south block, 0 kilo tail, work in the middle of the
My
straight.
climb rate kind of decreases,
3,000 below.
but not by much. I get a lot more forward visibility, but I also get more drag, so I'm not traveling as far anymore. So even though takeoff flaps are great for when I'm leaving the airport because they give me a lot more lift leaving the ground,
Yep.
they're not that efficient when I'm just doing sort of an en route.
Last call, can you please say again?
So in the white, flap
0
standing.
kilo tail, we're working the north-south block of the straight. We're in the middle of the
So
straight.
landing
Working
flaps
3,000
are
below.
absolute garbage in a climb.
Yep.
So if I want to maintain 75, I almost have to put my nose down, even with full power. My climb rate is now almost 0.
Right.
I have a ton of forward visibility, but the amount of drag that's being added by these landing flaps absolutely reduce their usefulness.
Absolutely. Yep.
So there's absolutely no use for landing flaps in a climb. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to climb up to 3,500, and we're going to talk about factors affecting a descent. And surprisingly, they're all the same. So carburetor heat. If you're descending through icing conditions, use carburetor heat.
Right. Yep.
The fact that it takes away engine power doesn't matter as much.
You're reducing your engine power anyways.
Exactly. Exactly. When it does matter is if you're in an overshoot.
Right.
If you're in a bulked approach and you forget that carburetor heat, that
Right.
becomes an issue.
Okay. Yep.
Retractable gear, you actually want to drop it. If I pitch for 60 knots with flaps in cruise, I'm actually still going to have a pretty nose high attitude.
Right.
Even now, like, I'm going to have a pretty nose high attitude. I'm not even at 60 yet. So 60 knots, and this is what I see. Right? I'm descending. Not a lot though.
200 feet per minute.
200 feet per minute. I don't see a lot in front of me, and when I'm descending, that's an issue.
Right.
I need to see in front of me. You can even hear the stall horn kind of going on too.
Yep.
Below 100, flaps take off. Stall horn goes away because with flaps, the stall speed decreases. And now I have to pitch down to maintain 60. I see more in front of me.
Yep.
I see more in front of me, but my descent rate is still pretty much the same.
Right.
All this did was drop my nose and decrease my stall speed, but it makes it more stable. In the white, flap standing. Now, here we go. A lot more ground. I can see everything I need to in front of me.
Right.
When we're on approach to the runway, I need to see the runway. As VFR pilots, we're not staring inside. When we're closer to the runway, I need to stare outside. Landing flaps help me achieve that. As well, our rate of descent increases a bit. Increases a bit. If I decrease power, as with any of them, it would increase my rate of descent.
Right.
So flaps and descent are immensely useful. So we use them every time we come in for an approach.
Thanks for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe below. As well, if there's anything you'd like to see on the channel, mention it in the comments down below. Make sure you stay tuned for part 2 of this lesson, where we talk about terns, and I have my first encounter with wildlife.